Welcome to Football Game Plan's Fantasy Football Starting Lineup. I'm Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook. That's Chris James, the analyst with Football Game Plan at CJ Florida 9. I'm at F-Ball Game Plan. There is McMain High School. Both of Chris and I were high school teammates. Guess you guys know that by now, but we're going to remind you every show because we want to get McMain in there and also just want to highlight the pride that we have in the Mustang program. But Chris, Week 6 in the NFL, it's a weird one because you had games all over the place. You have games on Sunday, Thursday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. But we're here, a lot to get into. What was the biggest story, obviously, is the Dak Prescott news. And I want to also ask you about A.J. Green. But starting with Dak Prescott, what was your initial takeaway from that injury?
So I was extremely frustrated. And obviously, this is a fantasy show, so we're going to discuss the fantasy implications, but I want to go to the NFL implications. See, in the 2016 draft class, guy went number 1 overall, Jared Goff. He got his money. No one really batted an eye, maybe a few people. Carson Wentz went number 2 overall. He got his money, and people said, generational talent, you got him for a low price. Dak wants a contract that's a little better than theirs because, let's go ahead and be honest, Dak is way better than Jared Goff. And he's better and way more durable until this than Carson Wentz. So let's go ahead and get that out of the way. So I'm extremely frustrated that they made this man get on what I call the Kirk Cousins plan of the franchise tag. Only 2 other quarterbacks have ever had it. He's the 3rd. So it's absolutely unacceptable. From a fantasy perspective, this dude was winning you weeks. I mentioned it last week. I said start him against everyone. And unfortunately, his season ended early. What does it mean? You have a capable backup in Andy Dalton behind him. So from a fantasy perspective, that's a way that you can take care of that. Even if he's 75% the value of Dak Prescott, that's 300 yards total a game. That's, 300 yards passing a game. That's 15 to 20 yards rushing a game. That's 3 touchdowns. That's 22 to 28 fantasy points per game, depending on your league, 4 or 6 point touchdowns passing. That's excellent. So this offense should still be good. Andy Dalton is a capable quarterback.
It's funny because we bring up Andy Dalton and we're going to talk about his teammate now in A.J. Green. And the reason why I asked you about A.J. Green is because there was a viral clip going around of him on the side talking to someone, and he was like, well, just trade me. Like, man, like you could literally see those words come out of his mouth. You could feel his frustration out there on the field as well. What are your thoughts about A.J. Green?
And I think that would be a great decision because they're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. They gave all the targets to A.J. Green, but there's something that's just not there, and maybe it's the scheme and design of the offense. But, I mean, he got 13 targets in a game against the Cleveland Browns with 3 catches and, 14 yards. It's not there. T-Higgins comes in, less targets, more production. So, yeah, trade him to someone who, this guy deserved it. He put up with the way the Bengals handle things for a very long time. Franchise guys, send him to a place where they can use him in New England or someplace like that because it's clear that the youth movement is in Cincinnati.
That's crazy if he lands in New England with Cam Newton and Bill Belichick and, Josh McDaniel and, everybody out there in New England. That's going to be nuts, man. But let's jump into the fantasy news for Week 6. We're on the waiver wire as we always start the show. So let's start with the quarterback position. So who's some of the guys? I think I know one guy on your waiver wire list that you're focusing on.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the guy who I said, heck, it's my fantasy sleeper this week because, of course, Ryan Fitzpatrick would have that game against San Francisco 49ers. He's in a great matchup this week, which means he'll probably not do well, but he's playing against the Jets, so go scoop him up if you can. Nick Foles, because that Carolina team that he's playing this week can put up points. They're young, they're playing well, but Nick Foles is a competent quarterback. He should be able to put up some numbers if you need a fill-in. Andy Dalton, I just mentioned him. This offense wants to click, and that defense is not good at this stage, so they will put the ball in the air quite a bit. Andy Dalton could be in for a good game, even against a Cardinals defense that's played well. And the final guy is this guy. He's a sneaky ad because he's doing the job right now, taking some deep shots, which we didn't know if he could do. That's Derek Carr on a bye. Pick him up this week because next week might not be there.
That's smart, man, because, again, he's coming off a fantastic game. He's on the bye, so he probably got dumped by a lot of people off their rosters. So, yeah, he's sitting there probably in the waiver wire waiting to get acquired, and next week he probably isn't going to play well again. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does moving forward. I always like Derek Carr, so I'm excited to see how he can continue to play well. Moving on to the running back position, who do you have your eye on the waiver wire?
So this guy I'm just going to mention him because people will say, why didn't you? Madison out of Minnesota. He's on rosters already. I have him on all my rosters that I have available, so he's not on the waiver wire. But this guy is. Brian Hill. Look, the carries are going to start mounting for a guy like Todd Gurley. He had his best game. They're going to start jettisoning some of those carries, and in a matchup against a Minnesota team that can't stop anyone, this might be a Brian Hill week. Tony Pollard. Again, the running backs are thin, but let's go ahead and put a guy who's going to probably get checked down from Andy Dalton in there in the passing game against an Arizona team that can put up points. Another guy that I want to talk about is a hybrid. Depending on where you play, he could be in the running back spot, and that's Cordarrelle Patterson. Again, should be a higher scoring game. They've given David Montgomery enough opportunity that now they're going to say, guess what? Maybe we need to get the ball to Cordarrelle Patterson. So in a deep league, that's a good flyer for you. And the final one is good old reliable. There's trade talks about Le'Veon Bell. So Frank Gore is probably going to be in the driver's seat pretty soon. And playing against Miami, this is probably a game where they give him a lot of carries because he's from that area.
Yeah, Frank Gore is the football player version of Wayne Fonts. You know, you can't get rid of him. He is going to continue to get carries and continue to play ball at a Frank Gore-like level. Now, at wide receiver, I'm surprised that this guy is on the waiver wire right now because of what he's done. Usually, fantasy players are so reactionary. So if a guy it doesn't have to be a touchdown. If he just has a catch, if they break the huddle and put him in the slot, everybody next week is like, oh, you got to go pick up this guy. So I'm shocked to see Chase Claypool here on the waiver wire.
Well, he won't be for long. This is only literally for people who have the number 1 or 2. For the people who had number 1 and need a Dak replacement. Fantasy pickup on the waiver wire. You're probably going to end up blowing a lot of your fab on it. It's because Chase Claypool is, physical specimen, and it looks like he's going to get some big run. Kind of reminded me of Martavis Bryant, the way they use him in his game. Even looked the same in that jersey. So
right.
You won't be able to get him if you're not one of those top waiver at positions. Brandon Cooks. Odd what happens when a coach parts ways and all of a sudden they say, hey, we got this dude who's super fast, first round pick, had a bunch of yards with the Saints and everyone. Why don't we throw the ball? Weird. So against Tennessee, he'll probably be the guy with Will Fuller probably drawing any shadow coverage. Keelan Cole. Again, this whole Jacksonville thing is a mess sometimes, but they're going to throw the ball. They're not good on defense, just period. So he's out there on waiver wires. Pick him up. Christian Kirk is another guy. Again, playing against Dallas. Let's move on.
Go ahead. That defense in Dallas is atrocious.
The secondary is amazingly bad. And the same thing I said about Derek Carr. This guy won't be out there. You probably won't get him. But Mike Williams is, oddly enough, in a lot of leagues not owned. He's on a bye week this week. Pick him up if you can because Keenan Allen is having Keenan Allen injuries again.
Yeah, it was funny because he was standing on the side with a back injury, and he's like, yeah, I'm good. It's like, and he didn't play the rest of the game. It was like, you're not good. You know? It's, I don't know, man. It's funny because Mike Williams is here on your waiver wire. We talked about Chase Claypool, and now we move on to the tight end position. And there's guys here that I was thinking, man, why are they not on rosters? But here we are.
Yeah, and tight end has been so weird this year where, again, anyone with a pulse is worth starting in a lot of situations. But I'm going to give you guys that are guaranteed to be on the waiver wire that have great matchups. Austin Hooper against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has not done well against tight ends this year. Minkah Fitzpatrick isn't doing Minkah Fitzpatrick things. So they're going to cover OBJ. They're going to try to hold up against that run game. So what is going to be open? Austin Hooper, who they paid a lot of money to. Kyle Rudolph. He didn't show up last week against Seattle. Odd game flow. But he's playing Atlanta. Come on.
I'm about to say, right. Hey, you know what happened last year when they gave the keys to Raheem Morris. So let's see what he can do now in the driver's seat. But you're right. It's not going to happen this week.
Probably not. And then Darren Fells is the last guy. Look, that Houston tight end with Akins and Fells, you never know which one, but Akins already picked up. Fells is getting some targets. So he had a touchdown last week, I believe. So go ahead and pick him up, even as a bench stash, see what happens.
Defense and special teams can win you leagues this year, especially if they have the right matchup. So who are some defenses that you're eyeing on the waiver wire that have that matchup this weekend?
In a really poor matchup for them last week, they showed up. So I expect them, coached by a really good defensive-minded head coach, to show up again. Brian Flores has those Dolphins playing hard. They're playing against the Jets again.
Whew.
So pick them up. Another team. People forgot the Bears are still good. They're not 85 Bears good, or even 2018 or 17 Bears good, but they're good. And they're playing against Carolina. This will be a sneaky game for them where they could get you some fantasy points. And then the last one is, it's my long shot. We'll talk about them later again, but I like the Packers defense off of a bye against Tom Brady and company. They do way too many things that Tom Brady doesn't like on defense.
Hey, listen, that Jets-Dolphins game may be brutal, man. That right there is going to be a problem. I agree with you about the Bears. Their defense can still apply pressure. It's funny, when they get a competent offense, then their defense continues to play like it did when they went to the playoffs. So totally agree with you there.
Yeah. I mean, it's competent offense or lack thereof is what ruined the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm just saying.
That's true, because their defense was right up there with the Bears defense that we saw a couple of seasons ago. But when your offense is not doing what they're supposed to do, defense gets frustrated, they get tired, they get scored upon, and it has been a mass exodus out of Duval County. So we'll catch up with we'll do some buy or sell next, but we'll take a quick break and be back with more football game plans, fantasy football starting lineup. Be sure to order your copy of the Go-Go Offense by Coach Brennan Marion on footballgameplan.com/Go-Go Offense. Coach Marion goes through the ins and outs of his explosive offense, one that's tearing up the college football field and putting a lot of points on the scoreboard. Again, you can order your copy at footballgameplan.com/Go-Go Offense. And welcome back to Football Game Plans, Fantasy Football Starting Lineup. That's Chris James at CJ Florida 9. I'm Emory Hunt at FBall Game Plan. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Football Game Plan. Also subscribe on iTunes to Football Game Plan Podcast and leave us a 5-star rating. We're going to start pumping out these podcasts pretty soon, so get in line, subscribe, like what we already have, star rating, all that good stuff like that, and also subscribe to YouTube and share it with all your friends, family, and significant others, your boo things, anything you want to do, just share it, like, pound that subscribe button. So Chris, now that we got all of the business out of the way, let's do some more buy or sell. And we're going to go by position here, and we'll start with the quarterback position, the guy we mentioned earlier, Andy Dalton. Are you buying or are you selling Andy Dalton the rest of the season?
So I have to buy Andy Dalton for the reasons that I tell you to draft people in fantasy. Opportunity. Their defense is not good. They're going to have to score points. Talent. He has all the receivers, period. And a running game. So they should be good on offense as well. And then past. People act like Andy Dalton was a poor quarterback. He wasn't poor in real football. And in fantasy, he was a competent quarterback. Usually floated around 12 to 15. And there was a couple of years where he was near the top 5. You put these receivers around him like you have with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb, I think he can put up some good numbers. So I am buying Andy Dalton.
You know, it looks like one of those Bengals teams he was on when they had the receivers around him, had a good running back in the backfield. It's almost like he is the ideal quarterback to take over a team that lost its starter. So I agree with you. I'm all in on Andy Dalton, getting a chance to rewrite his closure that he had in Cincinnati with a fresh start here in Dallas, taking over a team that's desperate. So we move from one team that looks optimistic to another team whose situation looks desperate. So I threw both quarterbacks in here. Alex Smith, Kyle Allen. Which one are you buying? Which one are you selling?
So I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, but it's tangential.
I like that word.
I hate how everything was handled with Dwayne Haskins. You just don't do that. You don't do that outside the organization. You don't handle a young player like that. Maybe the problem was coaching and scheme. Maybe you shouldn't have 4 receivers in between the hashes within 7 to 15 yards. That never works on any level. So maybe it's just you. And you want to know why? Because the guy that you wanted in Kyle Allen, who went out with an injury, and then Alex Smith, in 52 plays had 108 yards of offense. Right. So it's all Dwayne Haskins. So I'm selling this quicker than anything ever because I'm happy for Alex Smith for getting back out there, and I have no shade towards Kyle Allen. But the problem with the Washington football team is the coaching.
Totally agree. I'm selling that situation because then they complain about the weather as if the team from Southern California wasn't out there throwing the ball all over the yard. Like, come on, man. It never rains in Southern California. You can't blame the rain. That's 2 songs I threw in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I thought I was gonna get it. I didn't even realize I threw in a second song in there. All right, we're gonna move on to the running back position and a couple of more teammates because this one is interesting, and we've mentioned both guys separately on this show many different times. But I think it now has come to a head to where we have to make a decision: Chase Edmonds or Kenyan Drake. Which one are you buying? Which one are you selling?
So I'm actually slightly buying them both, but with proper expectations. If you remember the season, my bust guy, being a guy who will go in the first round or early second, was Kenyan Drake. He did it for less than half a season, and there was a guy in the backfield who, and this is again no shade to him, I think is more talented than Chase Edmonds. So okay, what is fantasy football about? Opportunity, right? So he's getting the carries, but he's not getting the targets, and you probably play in a PPR league. He's also not as efficient as Chase Edmonds has been at any point in time this year. So just temper your expectations. He's going to be a low-end RB2 or a flex in Kenyan Drake. And then you'll have a flex value in Chase Edmonds, who could be a legit high-end RB1 if there's an injury to Kenyan Drake.
Stay in the backfield with another duo that seems to, there's two sides where you have this player's camp and that player's camp, and I'm talking about Pittsburgh's Benny Snell and James Conner. Buy or sell?
So you unfortunately have to stay in the James Conner business because you probably spent a top 4 pick on him. I want out of the Benny Snell business completely, and I actually want out of this backfield business as possible. Listen to these stats. Against Philly, who is a solid front, they have a really good front seven, especially on the defensive line. 15 carries, 44 yards is James Conner. That's 2.9 yards a carry. And that included a 25-yard run. Okay, Benny Snell, 7 carries, 19 yards, 2.7 yards carry. This is atrocious. At this stage, here is what I would recommend for you. Again, you got to keep James Conner. Only start him if you have to, which you probably will. Get rid of Benny Snell. Pick up, if you have a bench slot in deep league, Anthony McFarland. Because I think later in the season, they'll start to see, okay, this is not working. You might have to throw the ball a little bit out of the backfield and give it to the explosive guy, by far the most explosive running back in that backfield.
Yeah, it's amazing that this guy just looks faster than everybody that they put out there on the field, and they don't give him more carries. Like you said, eventually it'll be his show in the backfield that'll help this offense continue to be a big play offense that we'd like to see the Pittsburgh Steelers offense be. Moving on to the receiver position, this is the guy that, staying in the state of Pennsylvania, Travis Fulgham for Philly. Seems like he has blown up the last 2 weeks. You're buying or you selling?
I am buying, but I am renting. So this is a short run purchase. While those guys are out, what I will say is this, practice squad guy, and people like to make this whole statement about practice squad, this and that. This dude looks like a real NFL receiver. He runs great routes, and he's always open in the zone. Smart player. I don't understand why you wouldn't buy what he's doing right now as long as Deshaun Jackson and Jalen Reagor are out. Buy it for the next 2 or 3 weeks. He's done a good job.
Definitely earned his position straight out of ODU, Old Dominion University. Shout out to those guys down there, the Monarchs. TreQuan Smith, New Orleans. I mean, I feel like TreQuan Smith we've talked about a lot over the years. They drafted him pretty high, in the 3rd round, I believe. And, it's time for him to show up. So are you buying or are you selling?
I am selling aggressively on TreQuan Smith. TreQuan Smith has had, and I would rather have Travis Fulgham year long than TreQuan Smith. TreQuan Smith has had 2 fantasy relevant games, I think, with multiple touchdowns. And the last one was without Michael Thomas. I mean, falling down on routes, he doesn't seem like he's getting it. And in fantasy, you need some consistency, and he just is not offering it to you. He was the 3rd best receiver on the field there tonight because Callaway was actually better than him.
That's true, man. And Callaway looked good returning punts. It's only a matter of time before they start to factor him even more in that offense. Had a big reception on that last drive where he kind of, showed his strength and ran through a defensive back to get the first down. So Eagles receiver, former Eagles receiver, and Eagles fans will want to perk up for this name because he's been doing a great job out there in Las Vegas, and that's Nelson Aguilar. Are you buying what he's doing, or are you selling the fact that, okay, it's maybe a flash in the pan?
So I am buying him in real football because I think he's a much better football player than people gave him credit for in the past. I'm selling him in fantasy. Let's think about it like this. Henry Ruggs came back. He's going to be a thing. They like to throw the ball short. He's basically the 5th option in this offense as it sits behind Darren Waller, Henry Ruggs, Edwards when he comes back, Renfro. He might be behind Zay Jones sometimes. So I'm selling this from a fantasy perspective. Again, much better real football player than fantasy football player at this stage.
And this guy I want to throw out there for a receiver because I just like his game in real football, and that's Rashad Higgins. He got in the end zone last week against Indianapolis. Do you see that as something that you can hang your hat on? Are you buying or are you selling what we saw from Higgins last week?
So similar commentary, except more in depth. So Higgins had all the receptions when he was in college, right? I like the fact that this dude blocks like a champ. He's one of the best blocking receivers I've seen in the NFL. So kudos to him on that. From a fantasy perspective, unless you play in a super deep league or you play in a dynasty league where you want a stash, he's not going to get the value for you. This is an offense where Odell Beckham is questioned for his fantasy value. So I can't see Rashad Higgins giving you any fantasy value, unfortunately.
At tight end, we go to another set of teammates. And this is a tough one because in real football, these two dudes are dangerous together. But in fantasy, you have to make a decision. You have Darrell Everett and Tyler Higbee. Are you buying or are you selling?
This man's version of what they have in Philadelphia, where they do utilize the two tight ends. I'm selling this because people drafted Tyler Higbee as a top whatever player, like a top tight end, because he finished, I think, 9th or 10th over the last 4 weeks in all of fantasy. So anyway, that was without Gerald Everett. He's back. Everett is the number one tight end, period. So unfortunately, the fantasy value is killed. You never know which week either of them will produce. Again, this is a better football situation than it is a fantasy football situation, unfortunately.
And I want to stay in New York for this next buy or sell with the two tight ends out here. You have Evan Engram and you have Chris Herndon. Both have been talked about a lot. Both have been expected to make that next step, that next jump, so to speak, out there on the field. So which one of these New York tight ends are you buying or are you selling?
So this is an instance where talent, unfortunately, can't escape coaching. And to a lesser degree for Evan Engram, I wish they would actually split him out more and use him as a wide receiver so he could moss a bunch of those smaller cornerbacks. But who am I? I'm not a coach. So that's the issue I see with Evan Engram. That's why you don't get any consistency. But Chris Herndon is hurt by the fact that Adam Gase hates tight ends. Just period. When has he thrown it to a tight end? I mean, he doesn't throw to the running backs. Actually, who does he throw? Just Jamison Crowder. Literally, that's the only person on the team who gets targets. So Chris Herndon, unfortunately, I think season long has 5.4 fantasy points in a standard league and 18.4 in a PPR league for the season. 5 games. That's atrocious, and it's not really his fault.
That's crazy, man. He even threw the ball to Mike Gesicki when he was down there in Miami. So you're absolutely right about Adam Gase and his inability to throw the football to the tight end. So let's talk defense, because when you look at the Panthers and the Browns, both defenses are improving and they are contributing to their team's success of late. Both teams are on winning streaks. They're winning good football. So are you buying or are you selling both of these defenses?
I'm buying both for 2 different reasons. So I'm going to buy the Cleveland Browns because it's weird that controlling the ball and having them on the field for less time provides a generational type edge rusher like Myles Garrett and that defense the opportunity to make some plays. So that's why you buy them. They're going to be on the field less than most other defenses. I'm buying Carolina as well. And the reason I'm buying them is because youth movement, but they're well coached. They're the best coached team right now in the entire NFC South. Think about how crazy that is in a division that has Sean Payton, Bruce Arians, and a guy who let go but went to a Super Bowl less than a decade ago. So it's crazy that the best coached team is in Carolina, and I think that defense is starting to play really well.
Now, here's a situation where you have pieces on paper, and it looks good on paper, but it may not be adding up. But they've shown glimpses of being able to be a competent defense, and that's the Giants' defense and Washington's defense. Are you buying or are you selling?
I'm actually going to sell the Washington defense, and it relates to what I said earlier. Fish rots from the head. And it seems like that defense, with all the talent they have a defensive lineman who ran a 4.47. They have another dude who, yes, he's injured, but runs very similarly. They have all this talent on the defensive line, and they can't get right. There's something going on in that organization that Ron Rivera apparently has not been able to fix, and they need to get it straightened out. Because for right now, I wouldn't start this defense no matter what.
It's crazy, man, because you're right. All stars studded up front on the defensive line, names that you recognize on the back end, but they haven't been able to get right. But we will get you right with your starting lineup when we return after this break. So stay tuned. We'll take a quick commercial break once again and be back with more football game plans starting lineup.
Man, it's that old thing, perseverance, consistency, hard work. My goal is to put the same work into, my businesses, my family that I put into football, and I've been running with that mantra since I got married back in '97, that if I'm going to have a successful marriage, I got to, the same hard work and same consistency and discipline I had on the football field, I got to put in my marriage and with my kids and with my businesses and all that. So it teaches you a lot, man. How to deal with your fellow man and not look at his color, but look at what he can do for the overall good of what you're trying to accomplish. So sports to me in general is just an incredible deal when you talk about football specifically because of the closeness of guys. I just believe it's an amazing sport.
And welcome back to Football Game Plan's Fantasy Football Starting Lineup. Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Chris James, he's at CJ Florida 9. I'm at FBall Game Plan. Now it's time, kids, for the starting and sitting lineup. So, CJ, as we look at your starting lineup here, you have some great names as always on this list, but I'm intrigued about your thoughts concerning the running back, Jonathan Taylor, for Indianapolis, because we saw Phillip Rivers go full Phillip Rivers last week against the Browns. So I'm glad you have Taylor here as your starting running back. Why so?
So I believe the number is $25 million that they gave Phillip Rivers to come in, and they had seen his tape. So now that they saw last week's tape, I think Jonathan Taylor, and I'm not making a joke here, will get north of 30 carries. They are going to just run at Cincinnati and get the game over with and say, hey, Phil, you know what? The only thing we want you to do is hand off and take a knee at the end of the game. That's it, because they got to rein him in, and I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be the beneficiary this week.
Bro, the intercept he threw, the pick six he threw to Ronnie Harrison, it's like, bro, you looked at him. You saw him. Even Ronnie Harrison looked like, nah, he ain't throwing it this way. He see me right here. I'm like standing right by the receiver. Rivers looked at him again. Was like, yeah, I see you right there by the receiver, but screw it. I'm about to try to get it in there. It's like, man, I can't believe he's throwing this football.
It looked like the worst setup ever. You know how sometimes you eye to your team, like, yeah, watch this. It was almost like, he's like, hey, bro, no, I'm going to throw it to you. He's like, we didn't have this. Okay. It was so weird. It's almost like he had this amazing brain fart that happens to only junior hires.
I swear, man. And it's like every time it's down to, hey, we need you to go down and get us a winning score or tying score, he have these brain farts where you just like, I can't. Your sitting lineup, CJ, looking at who you have sitting this week or guys that you're saying don't have the best matchup, I find it intriguing that you have the Baltimore Ravens here on this list, because I kind of agree with you here. Baltimore's offense just doesn't look right to me. Their defense doesn't look right to me. Yeah, they blew out Cincinnati, but Cincinnati couldn't block anybody. But why do you have Baltimore's defense here on your sit list?
So feast or famine. And last week they were able to feast because they couldn't block the blitz. This week, with a quarterback who is a little more seasoned, and also the line is a lot better, even with injuries, than Cincinnati Bengals, they're going to try to blitz. Guess what? It's going to backfire on them. I think this will be a higher scoring game than a lot of people believe, and that's why I'm saying with the Baltimore defense, yeah, you probably have to start them, but you can't expect the type of points that they put up last week, and you definitely can't even expect their season average.
Yeah, because they scored points last week galore with the the fumble return for a touchdown, the sacks. It seemed like every play he was getting sacked. It seemed like by the end of the game, Burrow was about 150 pounds. It's like they were sacking weight off him. That's how many times they was hitting this dude. So You got some sleepers on here that I really like. One, we talked about Andy Dalton, your quarterback. He's your quarterback sleeper. But who are some other sleepers you have out here this week?
So we talked about a lot of these guys already, but Tony Pollard. I do believe that this is going to be a game where points are going to be scored because Arizona has great offense. And then you look and you say, okay, while Zeke can catch the ball out of the backfield, I think they might run more two-back and also put Tony Pollard in on third down. He got to get a touchdown this week. in a deeper league. Talk about Travis Fulgham. Again, he's going to be the beneficiary of the Marcus Peters scenario, which Marcus Peters is the best random zone, if I'm doing my thing, cover dude ever. But he is also I will give up the biggest plays ever. And Travis Fulgham will probably be the dude who ends up being the beneficiary. So he's a good deep league play as well. And Austin Hooper we discussed. Again, if you got to shut down all those other guys, so much responsibility. They're not going to pay attention to the tight end. A tight end that was paid a lot of money this offseason. And then we talked about a little bit earlier. I will go a little bit more into it. Tom Brady hates being rushed by 4 people and getting pressure on him. And while his offensive line's done well, good pass rushers are able to eat him up, kind of like Khalil Mack did. Having great corners that shut down his receivers on the exterior and a matchup safety that can take care of the tight end also bother him. This Tampa Bay offense does not run the ball as effectively as some others, so I think the Green Bay Packers can not only do well against Tampa Bay, I think they can give them the business this week because it's a perfect matchup against what Tom Brady and the Bucs want to do versus what a defense offers.
I like that pick right there between Green Bay and Tampa Bay. What's your must-watch game of the week that you're going to be focused in completely on Sunday?
So I want to see the dude who runs directly backwards. And I think it's on Monday now. But I want to watch the dude who's been balling this year, but ran directly backwards in a playoff game last year, play against a dude that people are calling the GOAT already. I believe that Buffalo's playing against Kansas City. I believe it's Monday night now. I think they moved that.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to watch that because I can't throw shade if Buffalo goes there and beats Kansas City. But this is a get-right game for Kansas City, and I think that they'll end up being the beneficiary. But it'd be fun from a fantasy perspective and also just from a real football perspective to watch that game.
They need to let them have that throw off at halftime. Like, just throw it. Just
87 and 85.
Exactly. Those two dudes, they're ridiculous. So, again, follow Chris at CJFlorida9. I'm at FBall Gameplan. Subscribe on YouTube to Football Game Plans Network, youtube.com/Football Game Plan. Football Game Plans podcast on iTunes. Leave us a 5-star rating. Click that subscribe button. And as always, have fun this week. Trust the analysis. You guys are smarter than you think you are. And we will see you next week here on Fantasy Football Starting Lineup.